This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Peace in the Middle East at Christmas now looks far away as talks on a ceasefire in Gaza, in New York and Cairo falter. Our other headlines, northern Gaza is left without a functioning hospital as aid agencies say operating theatres are becoming hospices for the dying. After China's earthquake, the race to provide shelter in freezing conditions for tens of thousands of people. And foul play and a red card for football's big bosses. Europe's top court says a Super League ban was unlawful. Hopes of ending the bombardment of Gaza and securing the release of hostages taken from Israel by Hamas on the 7th of October appear to be fading. It's now 76 days into this conflict that has claimed tens of thousands of lives, and negotiations taking place in Cairo that were described as serious and intensive appear to have reached stalemate. United States President Joe Biden says he does not expect a breakthrough anytime soon. Efforts to get humanitarian aid into Gaza have also been stopped as the United Nations Security Council delayed a vote on an aid resolution for a third day. Conditions in Gaza have been described as apocalyptic, with 90% of the 1.9 million people there displaced. Aid agencies say half the population is starving, with only a fraction of the 200 aid trucks allowed entry every day getting through. The Red Cross says the health service is in survival mode, a view shared by the World Health Organization.
Only 9 out of 36 health facilities are partly functional in the whole of Gaza. All of these in the south. There are actually no functional hospitals left in the north. Al-Ahli was the last one, but is now minimum functional. And still treating patients, but not admitting new ones.
The Palestinian Health Authority says at least 20,000 people have now been killed in Gaza. That's nearly 300 people every day. Nearly 10,000 of those who've been killed are children. The military objectives of the Israeli Defense Force to destroy Hamas and secure the release of about 120 hostages continues. The IDF says it's in the final stages of its ground offensive in northern Gaza and has now begun fighting Hamas in several neighbourhoods of Gaza City. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Trent Murray, who's watching events in Tel Aviv. Trent, first of all, a Hamas leader in Cairo to discuss a potential ceasefire. Both sides still exchanging rocket fire, and you've heard explosions in Tel Aviv earlier today.
Yeah, that's right, Jamie. At least a dozen interceptions by the Iron Dome air defence system over central Israel and Tel Aviv in the past couple of hours. No immediate reports of injuries. We're being told the Iron Dome system managed to intercept them all, but it does reveal 76 days into this war that Hamas does still possess the capability to fire off those salvos of rockets. Of course, this coming, as you say, both sides negotiating in recent days around the possibility of a ceasefire or humanitarian pause. Certainly from the Israeli side, they are open to the idea because they are very eager to try and get those 120 or so hostages home, pressure building on Benjamin Netanyahu to do that. But we are just hearing, as a result of those talks in Egypt, that we are still at a stalemate. Hamas has actually put out a statement in the past hour or so saying that there will be no talks over exchange of prisoners or captives except after a full cessation of aggression by the IDF. Now, of course, we know that Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken about this very idea of Israel pulling back completely from its operation in Gaza. He said it's effectively a non-starter and that anyone who thinks it'll happen is quote, detached from reality. So I think it will be another anxious night for those families here in Israel, with no immediate progress publicly seen on the hostage negotiation and ceasefire front. But we do know that negotiations are still at least being had and discussed by some of those intermediaries, including Egypt and Qatar.
The United Nations Security Council could vote on a resolution to increase aid into Gaza after many delays. What are the concerns on the Israeli side about this draft text?
Yeah, a could vote, I think, being the operative phrase there, Jamie. As you say, this has now been delayed 3 times. Some hope that it may get up today, but we'll just have to wait and see. The main sticking point, really, from what we're being told, is the Americans. They have got some concerns around the text, and in particular, it's around the delivery of aid, echoing concerns by Israel. The draft resolution, from what we have been told, calls for an immediate surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza and, crucially, for the UN to take over the inspection of that aid as it goes into the besieged Strip. Currently, the inspection is being done by the Israelis, and they say they want to retain that oversight in order to prevent weapons being shipped into Gaza or smuggled in within the aid. Now, we don't know whether they'll be able to get an agreement at the UN to have the Israelis relinquish that oversight and give it to the UN, but we certainly know that there's been some concern amongst regional players here that by having Israel have that oversight right, it effectively is giving a party to this conflict the potential to slow down aid as part of its war goals or operations against Hamas. Now, they haven't responded publicly to those claims, and they would probably largely dismiss them, I would say, but it just shows how the intricate nature of that language is holding up the very resolution. And of course, if they can't get the Americans on board, then the whole thing will just sink, because they do, of course, retain a veto right as a permanent member of the UN Security Council.
Trent, thank you for that. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv. Let's now talk to Mark Cancian, a former US Marine Colonel and Senior Advisor at Washington Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mark, welcome back. Good to see you. A ceasefire resolution delayed again for the 3rd time. Why, in your judgment, what are the main points of contention here?
We have to realize that this is a 4-corner negotiation. You have, of course, Hamas and Israel, but you also have the United States and the rest of the world, and trying to get all 4 of those corners to agree on a way forward is very difficult, particularly when 2 of them, Hamas and Israel, have vowed to destroy each other as part of their war goals. Now, something temporary might be possible. Hamas has been holding back the hostages of their ace. They don't want to use that unless they can get something very big. And then the Israelis, of course, have concerns about smuggling in weapons, as we just heard, and Hamas regenerating itself.
I mean, the world watches in horror at what's happening in Gaza, and perhaps in complete disbelief at the impotence of what's going on in the United Nations.
Well, unfortunately, the United Nations is a great place to build a consensus if the parties are willing to come together. That doesn't seem to be the case right now, certainly for anything permanent. I wouldn't be surprised if they might put something temporary together, a couple of hostages in exchange for some pause in the fighting. They did that, of course, before. Hamas has rejected that, but maybe something a little smaller, maybe 20 hostages, something like that. But that's probably the most that can be hoped for at this point.
Well, let's be hopeful and let's be optimistic. What would the adoption of a ceasefire resolution in full mean in practice?
Well, I think the ceasefire resolution, as it's now written, is a non-starter, and that's part of the problem. And there are parts in there that every participant in the negotiation objects to. For example, it calls for the Palestinian Authority to take control over the Gaza Strip. That's anathema to Hamas. They are deadly enemies. Israel has concerns about inspection. Might get around that by having a joint inspection of some sort. The United States objects to anything that looks like a permanent ceasefire, which would be in effect a Hamas victory. It's going to be very difficult to work something out, but long term, short term, temporary ceasefire, that might be possible.
What will be the political and reputational consequences of another failed vote?
Well, the UN has always had a difficult position in that they can't force parties to come to an agreement. We've seen that in Ukraine, for example, where the UN has been essentially impotent. They're a great place for parties to come together, but they can't force an agreement. And this is just another illustration of the organization's limitations.
Would removing the veto power make the United Nations Security Council more effective or simply effective? And is that a realistic possibility?
I think the short answer is no, because every member of the Security Council treasures that veto power. The United States uses it a lot, but so do the Russians, so do the Chinese, the UK also. So this is what makes them special and recognizes their special role in world affairs. They're not going to give it up. None of them.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that anyone who thinks that Israel will stop this war before achieving its goals is not connected to reality. So what hope does that give us for any deal to be reached?
Well, it's certainly going to be difficult. I think that there may be an opening when Israel has finished clearing the north, which they're pretty close to doing, and when they've also cleared Khan Yunis, that would be a natural place to stop, and there's, I think, an opportunity when that occurs.
Mark, good to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming back on the programme. Mark Cancian, the former US Marine Colonel and Senior Advisor at Washington Center for Strategic and International Studies. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, this is the night train crossing the border. Passengers settle in for the first journey of the new night train from Vienna to Hamburg.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Northern Gaza is left without a functioning hospital as aid agencies say operating theatres are becoming hospices for the dying. Our other headlines, peace in the Middle East at Christmas now looks far away as talks on a ceasefire in Gaza taking place in New York and Cairo falter. The death toll from Monday's earthquake in China has now risen to 135, with at least 12 people missing. Gansu was hit by a magnitude 4.1 aftershock on Thursday. Operations are moving towards rehousing the many people made homeless in sub-zero temperatures. Searches are continuing in neighbouring Qinghai province, where a number of people remain missing. Well, our correspondent Guo Tianqi is at an evacuation camp in Jijiashan County near the center of the earthquake. Guo Tianqi, temperatures clearly dipping below -15 there. How is the freezing weather affecting the relief work?
Yes, as you mentioned, the cold weather definitely hindering forces. High provinces, the situation is much more difficult. County,
I think we're struggling with that line, understandably, given the conditions. So we may return to the earthquake in China a little later in the programme. In the meantime, we'll carry on with the rest of today's news. And a ban on football clubs joining a new European Super League was unlawful, and football's governing bodies, FIFA and UEFA, abused their dominant positions. That's the damning verdict from Europe's highest court. The ruling comes nearly 2 years after 12 of Europe's top teams attempted to form a breakaway league. But under the threat of UEFA sanctions, it collapsed within days when 9 clubs withdrew. There was widespread condemnation from fans and even governments. But Spanish giants Real Madrid, who supported the league, say the verdict is a great day for football. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Ken Brown, watching events for us in Madrid. Ken, just remind us why the Super League was so controversial.
Well, it certainly caused a big ballyhoo a couple of years ago, Jamie. We saw fans, politicians, players, even governments come out against it. The fan protests were so vehement against it that it caused 9 of the 20 clubs to step away from the Super League. It even forced club owners like John Henry, who owns Liverpool, Joel Glazer, who's one of the owners of Manchester United, to publicly apologise to the fans. Fans were furious, saying that this was just another way that football was being handed over to the money men, that their game was being taken away from them. They talk about years of history and tradition. The English Football League, for example, goes back to 1888. That's a lot of years of tradition and history. They said that this new European League would basically entrench current inequalities, that we would see Europe's elite basically playing against each other over and over again for eye-watering sums of money. Fans nicknamed it the Super Greed. Now, they are dead against it. As I've mentioned, this league looks like it's been brought back to life, really, by this decision. I'm outside the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium. That's the home of Real Madrid, where today we heard Florentino Perez call this decision. He said that it was a triumph for the Europe of freedom, which is a little dramatic, really, but that has drawn the battle lines of this debate between the fans who say that this game is nothing without them, and people like Florentino Perez and the president of Barcelona Football Club, Joan Laporta, who say that this is a necessary evolution of the game here in Europe.
And the company working alongside these clubs on this project has already released a new proposal on the back of the verdict. So is a European Super League now back on the cards?
Yes, they certainly didn't hang around, Jamie. Within a couple of hours, they had a press conference streamed live where they set out the new system, the new proposals for this league. The ruling has brought the Super League back from the dead. There's no doubt about that. According to the EU, they said that FIFA and UEFA had used their position of dominance in the market to suppress competition. So A22 is the company backing the Super League. They declared today that the FIFA, the UEFA monopoly is over. They said football is free. Now, they did announce the structure of this new league. It features a 3-tier competition: Star, gold and blue, which sounds a little more like an airline frequent flyer program to me, but, you know, some marketing company definitely got paid to call them that, Jamie. They say it'll feature a league stage and a knockout stage. They're talking about a much bigger league of 64 teams, and they say it will be based on sporting merit. That wasn't the way it was going to be last time, that there will be no permanent members, that there will be promotion and relegation from the different tiers of this league. The clubs are hoping really to compete with the Premier League, which is taking a bigger slice of the international TV rights pie every year. But whether the clubs that have pulled out of the deal will get back on board, whether it'll actually go ahead, remains to be seen. I predict it'll be a long and drawn-out drama, which I'll be delighted to bring you the details of over the next few months, potentially years, Jamie.
Ken, thank you for that. Our correspondent Ken Brown in Madrid. Let me just take you back now to one of the other big stories, and the China earthquake, the race to try and provide shelter in freezing conditions for tens of thousands of people. Let's see if we can again talk to our correspondent Guo Tianqi at the evacuation camp in Jishishan County near the center of that earthquake. Guo Tianqi, temperatures dipping below -15. How is the freezing weather affecting the relief work?
Yes, definitely. The temperature is hindering the rescue forces in Qinghai province. As you just said, the rescue workers are still finding the missing personnel because there is a secondary geological disaster happened after the earthquake called the ground liquefaction, which means the underground water mixing with sand and soil that submerged some villages. So after a cold night like this, it's frozen instantly. So it's definitely hindering the rescue workers, so they're still focusing on finding the survivors. But in Gansu provinces, the authorities say the rescue priority is shifting into to provide medical cares for the injuries and also to ensure the livelihood in the resettlement area. And where I am standing is the Dahejia town, the epicenter, and this is the largest resettlement site called the Dahe village resettlement site. And today is the third day after the earthquake. We can see and feel that the livelihood and the daily necessities as well as the public services are much more abundant. Right now we can see that even if it's the nighttime, the light is still very bright because the state grid is bringing the generator here, and this area is covered with free Wi-Fi also, and that is provided by the China Telecom. They're driving their emergency telecommunication vehicles here, and also to prevent the low temperature to damage the residents here. They are using heat stoves inside the winter-style very thick tents, and also everyone is equipped with thick quilts and clothes, and hot meals are available everywhere. Also, this place is the front command center of many different rescue forces, such as the PLA, the armed police, also the firefighters, and lots of unofficial rescue forces. And they are coming together. They're gathering here first, and during the daytime, they are dispatched to nearby villages to help the locals to resettle and deliver some daily necessities to them. Well, I am here in front of some white tents, and they are the tents from the Gansu Provincial Hospital, and some of them are providing the treatments, and some of them are wards and pharmacies. On the little bit further, you can see a few trucks. They are that's the field hospital of the Gansu Provincial Hospital. And now I have Mr. Wang with me, the staff from the hospital, to tell us more about this field hospital. Mr. Wang, how many services can you provide in this field hospital, and how many patients receive treatment here?
So far, we have 4 medical vehicles for the earthquake relief. We have 1 truck for the water and power, 1 for laboratory, 1 for X-rays, and another 1 can perform surgeries. This form of hospital complex comprehensive treatment, including wound sutures, injections, and transfusions. These medical staff come from Gansu Provincial Hospital, giving emergency treatment and to an injured person. So far, we have treated 341 injured persons.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. And apart from this medical center and this resettlement site, there are at least 2 other medical centers. One is from the local hospital and another is from the PLA, that all of them can provide fundamental treatment for the locals and the people living in here, and the heavily injured people are transferred to higher hospitals in the first time they are found. Back to you.
Guo Tianqi, thank you very much. Now, sleeper trains were once the height of fashion in Europe, but cheap air travel changed all that. But now travelling overnight on the continent's railways is becoming popular again, with environmentally aware travellers and tourists wanting to avoid those airport queues. Many services have newly designed modern sleeping compartments and are luring people away from flying. Our correspondent Johannes Pletschberger reports on the Austria to Germany service.
All eyes on Austria's new Nightjet. Besides business travelers and tourists, many train enthusiasts came from far and wide to participate in the maiden trip.
So I'm from England and I've travelled here specifically to go on this train, just because of the new train. I'm filming it as well, so that's the reason I'm here.
Not long ago, night trains were considered a failure. In 2016, the German railways stopped their sleeper services. Austrian railways saw an opportunity and took over the German connections, aiming to provide a competitive and eco-friendly alternative to air travel between Europe's capitals.
For safeguarding our climate, for climate action, train needs to become the backbone of our eco-friendly, climate-friendly mobility. Public transport needs to be the backbone of climate-friendly mobility. And so we need to make sure that we increase the infrastructure, that we have modern infrastructure, that we have enough offer on the infrastructure, and that it's price competitive. And all of this we are working on in Austria.
Austria's newest Nightjet service connects Vienna with Hamburg. To compete with air travel, it offers increased comfort, private bathrooms with showers, and new mini cabins for solo travelers.
So far, I think it's pretty spacious. I just about fit in lengthways, and I think there's a good amount of width here as well. Got lighting controls, so I can set the lights to be exactly which colour I want, and the right amount of brightness. And there's a luggage storage as well, one for each room.
But tickets for the new train can be expensive. Depending on the day of the week, the cost of a comfort sleeper ranges from $60 right up to $800. Compared to a 1.5-hour flight, the 13-hour train ride takes longer and is prone to delays.
Not everything during this Nightjet launch went smoothly. With a delay of 3 hours, we've now arrived at our final destination, Hamburg. This train is the first of a total of 33 new night trains that will be added to the Austrian railway fleet, with the ambitious goal of doubling the number of sleeper passengers by 2030.
While train enthusiasts are thrilled, convincing frequent flyers might take more time. Europe's sleeper services still have a long journey ahead. Johannes Pletschberger, CGTN, Hamburg.
And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.